Hey everyone, Melissa here with Creatively Disruptive, and I'm here to talk to you about websites and just a few basics of what you might be needing to get started. So the first thing that you're going to want to pay attention to is what are you going to consider when you start your site? What will be on your website? Content is the most important thing because when people visit your site, they want information. The next thing to know is who is your audience? So who is this website going to be helping? Who's going to be visiting your site? Who are you going to be catering to? And then the next thing is how familiar are you with the web? Are you comfortable on the site? And what is your website building skill level? That's another thing to consider when you are going to start a new site. And that also goes into what platform you're going to be using. Also, to go along with that as well, do you consider yourself a designer? Are you comfortable working on websites? Are you comfortable with certain design principles and skills that make a good website? And how much time do you have to devote to your site? This is really important because your site needs to be a living, breathing thing. If you want people to visit often, then you need to have valuable content for them to visit. So keep that in mind. And then you're also really going to want to consider your costs. How much is site hosting going to cost, and how much is your domain name going to cost? A lot of people aren't familiar with the difference between site hosting and domain name. The thing that you need to remember is your website hosting, that's basically the server where your website lives. It's where the content exists. Your domain name, that's your URL. That's where people type in the address bar to go to see your site. They're two different things, and you're going to be paying for them separately. There are some companies, a lot of hosting companies offer like a package where you can get so much off of your domain name when you buy hosting with them. So those are just things to keep in mind. And then also, you want to remember you're going to have extra costs when it comes down to securing your website. And having a secure website is important for Google rankings, and also just for the safety of your visitors. You don't want somebody to visit your site and feel like maybe their information is going to get stolen. And this is true even if you're not collecting information. It's just good practice to have a secure website. So let's talk about some of the things that you're going to need to get started. The first thing you want to know, again, what platform are you going to use? Now, there's these four things that I've come up with that can help you decide which platform you'll use. One is the level of experience. Are you a beginner? Are you intermediate? Do you consider yourself an advanced web developer? If so, you're probably not watching this video. So that's just something to keep in mind. How comfortable are you? How much experience have you had? And then again, I've got comfort with design and tech. So, are you comfortable learning new things online? Are you comfortable in a creative space? And then lastly, have you used a site designer or a platform before, and which one is it? Generally, we go for stuff that's familiar to us. And so, those are things that you want to consider because that will help you decide which platform you want to use. A lot of the web is currently on WordPress, and that is my personal preference because there's a lot of different themes. There's a lot of flexibility in what you can do with your site. But there's also so many other good options. There's, Weebly, Wix, Squarespace. There's a lot of options out there for people who aren't as familiar and who need a little bit more handholding and who need a little bit more guidance as to what you're going to put on your site. You want a good template to start off with so that you have a good design, and those kinds of things are really important to consider. And we already talked a little bit about your costs for hosting, but you also want to consider when you're deciding who to host with, depending again on the platform, is going to also kind of depend on your host. Because, like, for example, with Wix, they host your site and they generally also provide the domain name. That's not always true. You can always have your domain name with a different provider than your hosts, than your site hosting. But a lot of these services will offer kind of a package deal. So definitely do your research. When you're considering, so we'll say that you kind of have your platform idea that you want to use, you kind of have your idea of who you're going to host with. Just like I said, make sure you do your research. So now that we've got that figured out, we're going to talk about your audience and your content. These things are important because you want your content to be relevant to the people who come to your site. And one of the questions that I like to ask a lot is, if you were a visitor to the site, what are you going there to find out? What do you want to know? And that's important, again, because you want your content to be relevant to people. You want them to come on your site and find what they're looking for, and you want them to be happy, because if they're happy with your website, they're way more likely to reach out to you or contact you or purchase your product or your service. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I like to ask is, what questions do people ask you the most often? So if you have a physical location, if they're coming in to visit you, or they call you, or they email you, what are a few of the things that you get asked the most often? And use that to put the content on your site. So this goes right along with it. Like I said, if you have a physical location, what do people look for when they come see you? Why are people seeing you? Are you offering a sport? Are you offering a physical activity? Are you offering learning? Is it a school? Are you offering a product? There's all kinds of different things that you might be offering. And so those are definitely something to keep in mind. And I know this is pretty basic, but it's amazing how often we draw a blank when we're like, oh, what do I put on my site? So if you can keep these things in mind, that's really going to help you come up with really good content for your site, and it's going to help you to really appeal more to your audience. So figure out who is visiting you. What are the people that are looking for your services? And then, what are the questions they're going to ask you? The other thing to keep in mind with your content, you got to keep it simple. Most visitors will leave your site if it takes 3 or more clicks to find what they're looking for. So if you've got all of your content buried deep underneath pages and pages of your site, it's going to be harder for people to stick around. You want to make sure that the most frequently asked questions, etc., those are at the top of your list. Those are easy to find. Your menu is easy to navigate. So keep it simple and keep it clean. So a few things, again, to consider to include in your site is cost. And this isn't the cost of your site. This is, what do people pay for your product or service? Because let's be honest, most people want to know how much it's going to cost. If you're a carpet cleaning service, they want to know how much your carpet cleaning is going to cost. If you provide a product, I mean, that one kind of goes without saying, especially if they're purchasing online. But if you provide a service, remember to include your costs. If you don't, some people can have a tendency to just assume that you're too expensive, and that's why you don't include your price. So people are going to be thinking things, and they're going to come up with assumptions even if those aren't true. So if you're a local business, hours of operation, kind of, again, seems like it should go without saying. But that's not always the case. We don't always remember to include that information. So make sure you include when you're open so people can come and visit you. If you're an online store, or if you are a local store but you do sell things online, how much is shipping? How long will it take me to get it? How much is it going to cost me? And how soon will you send it to me? So these are things that are important to consider when you are selling online. Again, physical location, include your address. You want people to come see you. You want people to walk in your doors. So make sure that you've got your address where it's easy to see. I always like to include the address in the header or at the top of your web page, and in the footer at the very bottom of your web page. And don't just include the address, add a link to maps. I like to use Google Maps, but there's a lot of different maps that you can use. Just find one that you think works really well and that you like. But make it easy for people to click that link and find out where you are. You're also going to want to include your phone number. You want people to be able to reach you. So again, include your phone number and make it clickable if you can. If you need help with that, it's easy to search online. There are a lot of online resources for your phone number. So mostly make it easy to contact you, make your information easy to find, and make it relevant. And to go along with that, we're going to talk about keeping things fresh. So on your website, you need to keep it updated. A few things that you can do is keep it up to date with your latest products, the most pertinent information. Again, if you're like a local place, if you have people coming regularly, is your store going to be under construction, or is there bad weather, or do you have a sale going on? I mean, just anything that you think people might want to know, just keep that up to date with your latest information. If you have price changes, again, or sales, that all goes in pricing. And then for your news, do you have an event coming up? Do you have stuff happening? And I think that if you do have stuff happening, people are going to go to your site to find out, because they really do want to know. And if you keep them informed, you're gonna really gain a lot of loyalty for that. So you have to also ask yourself for your site, are you going to have a lot of returning visitors, or do people come to your site for a one-off visit? So these are things to definitely keep in mind when you consider keeping things fresh. If you have people who generally come and buy a single product and then don't come back, then you don't need to worry about including your latest information or news, stuff like that. But if you do have people who are going to keep coming back to check for updated information, then you want to really use that information. The last thing you need to consider, because I know a lot of owners and managers, businesses, you don't have a lot of time. You have a lot going on. So make your site easy to update on a regular basis. So those are some really, really important things to keep in mind. And there's a lot of online resources. And so just a few of the things that I would say is, don't be afraid to search the internet, because there is so much information out there. And sometimes that can actually be to our detriment, because we can get information overload. But if you can search specifically for what you're looking for, generally you'll be able to find it. A few things that I like to look for when I am looking at doing a new design is color wheels or color generators. And there's a lot of really cool ones out there. And those just will kind of help you pick out a design and colors that really go well with your logo, or with the stuff that your products that you're trying to sell, and the brand that you're developing. You can also look for how-tos, because sometimes we're learning here. We're all learning, and so searching for those is always good. And then if you want to keep your website really looking spiffy, use good fonts. And I don't mean just fancy fonts, because fancy fonts can actually be a detriment. If you have too much, it can definitely be too much of a good thing. So you're going to want to look for things that are easy to read, that are straightforward, that have a little bit of flair, but don't overwhelm your site. And use those ones sparingly, like in headers, so like your titles. And then use a simple and easy to read font for your copy. And then you can also search out design concepts and themes. So these are a few things to keep in mind when you're getting started on a website. And yeah, thanks for joining me. Let us know if you have questions in the comments.